Welcome to our Legal Automation webinar series, which is organized by Black Hills IP. Black Hills IP is a U.S.-based IP docketing and paralegal service provider. We focus on using technology and automation to provide the highest quality level of services available today. For this particular webinar series, we've brought together experts to talk about how automation, artificial intelligence, and expert systems are being used in the legal field. The Legal Automation webinar series is free. This is one of several monthly webinars that we've already presented in this series. To watch our previous webinars, go to the Educational Resources tab of the Black Hills IP website, which is just www.blackhillsip.com. The webinar that we are presenting today will cover AI and legal research tools. We will allow time at the end of the program for questions. You can submit questions at any time, though, throughout the program by using the question box in the control panel that's probably on the right-hand side of your screen. Today, the presenters are myself and Thomas Hamilton. I am Ann McCracken, the president of Black Hills IP. I'm a patent attorney with 21 years experience in patent prosecution. I was a partner at the firm Schwegman Lundberg Wissner for 10 years, and I was a full-time law professor and directed the patent prosecution program at Franklin Pierce Law Center for 5 years. Justin, I'm having some trouble advancing the slides. Can you take a look at that while Thomas introduces himself? Thomas, could you give a quick introduction of yourself and Ross Intelligence?
Yeah, sure thing. And am I coming through clear, Ann?
Yes, very much so.
Beautiful. Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Thomas Hamilton. I'm the VP Strategy and Operations at Ross Intelligence, which is an artificial intelligence company in the legal technology space. Specifically, we focus on legal research. Now, I'm an attorney by training. I practice corporate commercial law with a lot of focus on the tech space. I started out my career at Dentons, actually Fraser Milner Casgrain, which then became one of the three founding firms of Dentons, which since then has of course continued to scale at a pretty wild rate. So when I was there, the majority of my clients were sort of large blue chip technology companies. I was working out of the Toronto office, which was at the time just a few blocks down from the beginning of sort of the AI ecosystem hypergrowth phase that was happening in Canada. So this was a few years ago. Of course, now Canada has the AI labs for a lot of the United States' leading technology companies like Facebook, Google, and Uber. So as part of just sort of my day-to-day and business development, I kept an ear to the ground in terms of what was happening in the AI space. One of the companies I brought by the firm was Ross Intelligence. They were founded out of University of Toronto. Their AI engineer co-founding team was taught by Geoffrey Hinton, who's generally viewed as sort of the godfather of modern deep learning, which powers most cutting-edge AI tech now. And I was given an offer to come on to leave the big law life as the first employee of the company 3 years ago. So what started as sort of a brief sabbatical in Silicon Valley to build out my book and get exposed to a very exciting tech space turned into a bit of a career pivot, left big law, and I have been with the company ever since. And today we're going to have some fun sort of speaking about what's happening in artificial intelligence, how that's applying to the sort of mainstream technology sector, but also how it dials into legal technology, and then chatting a little bit about what we're doing at Ross Intelligence as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Thomas. Real quick before you start, I just have one slide that has an overview of the types of technologies that we've discussed so far in this webinar series and that you could go and listen to on demand on our website. So we've highlighted things like transaction management, due diligence, contract review, document proofing, expert systems, and document automation. We have individual webinars recorded on all of those topics. So with that said, we'll move into the last webinar in this series, and I'll turn it over to Thomas to talk about AI in the legal research area.
Great. Now I'm just going to pull up my presentation screen right now. Is that coming through if I move through the slides?
Thomas, if you click into the screen where the actual webinar is and use your arrow keys, it should work for you.
Okay, great. 1 minute. So I'm on the webinar right now. Yeah, perfect. Okay, let me just see. Is it moving through? Okay, I think I might be on a little bit of a lag, but that's completely fine. Okay, so like I said today, what we're going to do is we're going to chat a little bit about the meaning of artificial intelligence as a whole. So when artificial intelligence is used in 2018, and it's used very frequently now, really it's referring to 4 sort of umbrella terms. So if you asked an artificial intelligence engineer, a machine intelligence engineer, a machine learning engineer, there's a couple different sort of titles they have in Silicon Valley in 2018, what is artificial intelligence? Really, it would break down into 4 pillars. So first off, in terms of the definition of it, I like to start with this. It is not the be-all, end-all. It is not sort of HAL from a Kubrick movie. It's not a robot coming to take our jobs as attorneys. It's really just a new, very powerful wave of software that has been developing for many, many years. So generally speaking, what exists in artificial intelligence is a function of 3 things. Increases in computational power, increases in the availability of enormous data sets, and then also increases in the theoretical algorithms that power AI systems sort of in their present form. What's important to keep in mind is that most of the theoretical algorithms that power AI systems have been around for years. It sort of, you can get a bit pedantic about it, but at least since World War II under Turing, AI systems have existed in one form or another. Now, the theoretical AI space is always evolving, but that's what I do like to sort of ground it with. Much of the theoretical sort of thought process that exists, that is used now, has been around for a long time. What's changed in the last few years is the availability of sufficient computational power, not just a function of Moore's law, right, that every 18 months processor power doubles, but also the arrival of absolutely massive data sets, which are essential for the training of artificial intelligence systems, specifically for the training of machine learning systems. And we'll come back to that a few times. That's a spoiler alert as well, because it just so happens that case law is a wonderful set of training data as well. Okay, so like I said, there's 4 pillars of artificial intelligence in 2018. The first is machine learning, which underpins everything that is possible with AI systems. All right. So when we're thinking about machine learning is the capacity for a software system to learn how to do things we never told it how to do. All right, let's get sort of micro here. What does that mean? What we're looking at right now is, this is just a command console. It's a few lines of code. This historically is how you created software that could do different tasks. You explicitly explained exactly what you wanted the software to do. So let's take a really, really oversimplified example. You create a word processor, in the 90s, WordPerfect. It's great, people love it. They say, listen, I love, typing in a memorandum or a brief or a pleading, but you know what? I really want to be able to print this document. So what do? You have your engineers come in, they type out lines of code, explicitly training a system to be able to print. Now, as software becomes more and more complex and is able to do things like recognize our faces or drive cars for us, it becomes incredibly difficult for an engineer, even a subject matter expert engineer, to explicitly train software to do very advanced tasks. That's where machine learning comes in. The idea is that AI systems, when they're given an enormous data set, so numbering the hundreds of thousands of examples, is able to start understanding patterns and trends that even a human brain won't pick up on. And by virtue of doing that again and again and again, it's able to start to learn how to do things that as coders, we are not actually able to explicitly explain how to do, like recognizing one person's face compared against another's. Now, what's important here, like I said, this requires enormous training sets and it takes time. So machine learning systems learn almost like a child does. Early on, frankly, they're very bad at doing a new task. It takes a lot of work, but just like a child learning a new language, you start out very simply, you learn sort of simplistic grammatical structures, and then over time and with trial and error, you get better and better. So in terms of, what does this mean in the modern day? Let's use a few fun examples. So this is actually an example of how we've all trained machine learning systems. So this is a classic sort of security question. You might have seen this when, say, you were on maybe you were on vacation with your spouse, or you're traveling with work. You logged into a website, maybe into online banking, maybe maybe into Facebook, and you were asked to sort of prove your identity. And you'd be asked very simple questions like this. So here we're being asked to tag photos of a cat. This is something that is extremely easy for us to do. We probably did this when we were 2 years old. Very difficult for software to do, and almost impossible for us to explain to software by coding how to do this. But over time, through millions and millions of interactions of different people on the road, locked out of their online banking, an enormous data set was created that A, improves our security, but B, it explains to a software system, what does a photo of a cat look like? And that's an example of a very simplistic machine learning system. So now, as sort of the state of the art continues to move, you probably won't get asked to tag a cat anymore, but you might get asked something like this. So here, you're being asked, which quadrants is a car present? This is much more complex, even harder to explain to a software system how to do. But over time, it builds up a machine learning system's understanding of what a car looks like in real time. So, like I said, machine learning underpins everything that happens in artificial intelligence. We're going to circle back to it a whole bunch of times, but I always want to start with that. Okay, now, from there, the next pillar is speech recognition. Now that everyone understands what machine learning means, speech recognition is something that is actually more and more commonplace. And it's funny to say this. I've been lecturing on AI for a few years, which in startup land is sort of dog years, right? So it's 20 or 30 years. Speech recognition has moved from a kind of a cool feature to completely mainstream, and you see it everywhere. So a few obvious examples. This is Amazon Alexa. I have it by my bedside. I use it to set alarms, check the weather, that kind of thing. Siri on an iPhone, or Google Home. Now, this is a great example of how quickly the state of the art moves in AI, and how the definition of AI is always a moving target. So generally speaking, the definition of AI is software that does something we thought only humans could do. Very subjective, always moving target, always evolving. Speech recognition is a great example. So the iPhone came out in 2007. The iPhone 4S, which had Siri, was 2008. So 10 years, I guess, just almost 11 years now. When that first dropped, it was incredible. It's sort of something of a Star Trek movie. Now it's frankly something I complain about when it doesn't perfectly understand what I'm saying. That's a great example of how quick this stuff moves. It's also a wonderful sort of case study of machine learning. When it first was released, there was actually a lot of issues with it, but it got better and better. Recently, speech recognition software has broken through, and Microsoft was the first one to hit it, but now a whole bunch of providers have. It broke through the 95% word recognition threshold, which is sort of the bar set by the human ear as well. Okay, the third pillar is visual recognition. So this is sort of the new frontier. We've broken through the frontier of speech recognition. We're into visual recognition. Visual recognition is the ability for a software system to understand visual signals it receives. So let's use an extremely simplified example of vision recognition system. Let's imagine we want to create a software system that's able to tell us what suit a card is, any given card it's shown. And let's imagine we want to train that system as a machine learning system. What would we do? So we would start out with sort of perfect high resolution perfect lighting shots of different cards. We say this is I don't know, a 10 of hearts, this is a jack of clubs, and you would classify it. You would tag it for the AI system. This photo equals a spade. This photo equals a heart. From there, after hundreds of thousands of examples being fed in, you would start to make the photos more difficult. So here you'll see on my deck, there's a photo. It's obviously a king of spades, but it's sort of at a weird angle. The lighting is off. There's actually a little robot hand holding it. And you would start asking the system to classify those. And at first it would get them wrong again and again and again. But you would, through what's known as reinforcement learning, say, what do you think this is? It would say, I think it's a cat. You say, absolutely not. That is the king of spades. And from there, over time, over, once again, hundreds of thousands of iterations, it would start to become much more proficient in labeling it, and it started to give you confidence score. So here it's saying it's 84% confident that this is a king of spades. So highly simplistic example, but a fun example of how vision recognition systems are trained through machine learning. So now, I mean, we've blown way past tagging a deck of cards. Now what happens if you're using a modern cell phone is when it comes to security options, you might have more of an interaction like this, where it's able to recognize your face. And this is a fun example of how quickly machine learning systems learn, right? So the idea that, well, I mean, the idea you'd have a smartphone 10 years ago was already pretty new. But the idea that you'd have a smartphone that literally unlocks based on your face was frankly science fiction. It's now becoming very sort of standard. It's a good example of how quickly AI systems learn. Okay, so the last pillar and the most important for what we do as lawyers is natural language processing. So this is the capacity for a software system to be communicated with in the same way we'd communicate with a human expert, and then for it to return highly relevant on-point information in natural language, i.e. in written English in our case, in the same way that a human expert would do that. The first sort of famous example of this was when IBM's Watson supercomputer, which in early days our technology was built on top of, beat the two reigning Jeopardy champions. And that was a wonderful example of very narrow applications of natural language processing, because it basically, there was two humans and there was an AI system. They all received questions in the same format in natural language. I don't know, what is the capital of XYZ? And they all had to return answers on point. So let's sort of take a very simplified example of what natural language processing means. Like I said, it's the capacity for us to communicate to software systems if we're communicating with another human, and really a very sort of a human with a high degree of proficiency in that subject matter. Now, the reason why this is only becoming sort of possible in real world use cases currently is because this is very, very difficult to do. You think back to how I was saying before, machine learning, you have to explicitly train software to do everything you want it to do. It's almost impossible as humans to explain in code exactly how to interpret verbal or written communication in language, because there's so many nuances to it. But if we go back to the arrival of enormous data sets, you start to be able to train systems that with enough computational power and enough engineers behind them can start breaking down the relationship of different words. So let's take a fun kind of silly example. So this is a line from a Journey song. So born in a small town, she took the midnight train going anywhere. What does a midnight train mean in this sentence? It does not literally mean a train leaving at midnight, although actually sort of could, but that's irrelevant to the more thematic meaning. What is a midnight train? What's the relation to this subject being discussed? These are the nuances that are easy for us as humans, but extraordinarily difficult for software systems. But with natural language, those systems are getting better and better, and that's where legal technology comes to the forefront of the cutting edge of AI. Okay, so we've talked about sort of the four pillars of AI in broad strokes and how machine learning underpins all of it. Now let's sort of fast forward. Let's talk about how is AI being used right now in the mainstream. And you can't go sort of a week without hearing about AI somewhere. Mark Cuban saying something crazy, Elon Musk saying something crazy, the CIA saying something about how they're using it for weapons platforms. It's all over the news. So how is it being used right now? Well, it's so pervasive at this time that it's really changing every single industry. 3 years ago, when we started out, our hypothesis was there's going to be one AI company in every industry and in every vertical. Now, we knew that as technologists. We saw that playing out with companies like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, sort of the tech leaders. They were all quietly pivoting into AI. And now, I mean, they're very public about it, right? They say, all those companies have said openly that they are AI companies. But really, it's changing everything. So one example I like to use is ag tech. So agricultural technology is in some ways very forward thinking. In many ways, though, it's very conservative. It's like transportation, right? There's a rule book that generally the industry follows. But agricultural technology is being transformed at an incredible rate by artificial intelligence systems. A great example, I have a good friend here in Silicon Valley, works for a drone mapping company. So a lot of their biggest clients are large agricultural companies that employ huge numbers of drones. They use AI systems to check for things like soil quality, erosion, different weather patterns. Another great example that highlights how pervasive AI is it's also transforming the beauty industry. So L'Oreal, which is an enormous producer of different cosmetics, is also one of the biggest investors and acquirers of AI technology and entire companies. So this is a fun example. This is what's known as augmented reality. So it's not full-blown virtual reality where it's completely immersive, but augmented reality means that you're able to interact with the environment around you without being separated from it, but there's some sort of change to it. So here what we're seeing is just a fun app that allows you to sort of hold the camera up to someone's face and see what they look like with different makeup, lipstick, that kind of thing. I think the most important example of how AI is transforming technologies, because it leads into the next point we're going to talk about, which is how AI is touching law, is what artificial intelligence has done in medicine. So one of the first big breakthroughs in medicine with AI was the diagnosing of tumors. And the reason that happened is that AI systems need huge data sets, and there was an absolutely enormous amount of data on different, basically, diagnoses of tumors and what had worked and what hadn't. And what AI researchers realize is if you feed this information into an AI system, over time and with supervision by human experts, AI systems were able to start predicting if a tumor was malignant or not. Early on, the systems were not great. It was sort of a neat thing to have on the side. Over time, through more and more training, because they're machine learning systems, they got better and better. And eventually what happened is that AI systems have been created that were as good as a human expert in terms of diagnosing a tumor. Now, this is where everyone said, medicine's done, close the medical schools, fire all the doctors. But really the exact opposite happened. So what has now sort of come to pass is that a human expert will rely on and use AI systems to help them in diagnosing tumors. Because what has happened is that we found AI systems are very good at doing what we as humans are very bad at. So they never get tired, they never get bored, they never get annoyed. They have perfect attention to detail, but they have no capacity to understand any of the soft messaging. So what's occurred is actually what occurred in the past with supercomputers that could play chess, where a human expert using an AI system to augment their abilities is able to outperform even the absolute best human expert or the best AI system. It's a concept known as centaur chess. It's played out in medicine, and we're now seeing it playing out in the law as well. Okay, so that takes us to, I think, the most interesting part of this conversation, which is how can AI be used in law? So let's think sort of high level. What was legal technology for the last few hundred years? Well, it looked a lot like this. It was books, right? And if you happen to work for a very profitable law firm, or you were maybe a professor at a leading law school, you had access to a wonderful library with a large repository of books. If you didn't, it was hard for you to really know how the law worked. What changed that? Well, it was the arrival of this. So personal computing, affordable personal computing, I would say. And law was actually an early mover on search software, because as lawyers, we understood how powerful and how much of a game changer it was to be able to quickly search through all law for answers to a specific question. I would say sort of version 2.0 or 1.5 of this, after personal computing arriving in an affordable form, was also the arrival then of online search. So think of Westlaw, LexisNexis, the systems we currently use. We're now in the next age, it's the AI age of legal research technology, where the systems we use a little bit like this. So this is a screenshot I just grabbed off of Ross. That's our legal research platform. We're on a bit of a clock in terms of this presentation, otherwise I'd do a live demo, but please do feel free to reach out afterwards if you're interested in seeing more what we're up to. This is a screenshot of the system we've created. You'll see up here at the top, I typed in a question, says, what is the standard for patentability of business methods since 2010? Just typed it in sort of as is, almost like it would come from a client. I've added that I'm ideally interested in decisions matching to a motion to stay, and ideally with facts that touch on the stock market trading network. I'm not using Boolean-based queries. I'm just typing my question in as is. Because we have AI systems now that are context sensitive, so they understand sort of specifically the question you need to answer to, but the broader context, I'm now getting answers directly back from case law. And you'll see the first case, Bilski, that's a leading case. That's wonderful. Second case, the bottom of the screen, Athena Health. It's showing that there's a deep match that answers my question, but there's also a motion match. If I keep moving through the different results, it'll also find me cases that match the fact scenario as well. So that's the era we're in now of highly intuitive, very easy to use, plug and play. You can understand how to use them within 5 minutes. Legal research technology. This is the kind of thing where we work a lot of leading law schools as well. If you put it in the hands of students before they've used Westlaw Lexis, they will literally never use a Westlaw Lexis. And this is really exciting because it now puts legal technology back at the forefront of software. And frankly, as lawyers, as an industry, we have not been at the forefront of software for a long time. The reason for that is that legal technology for a long time, it was a cottage industry. So it was led by small companies with people that cared deeply and very passionately about changing the law, but they didn't have access to great engineers because the law as an industry was seen as something that didn't change, and so it couldn't attract great engineering talent. What that meant is that it was a little bit like buying a car 100 years ago. If you were rich and you had a lot of time, you could have a wonderful car made for you, but if you weren't, it was very difficult. You probably couldn't afford the systems out there. They were bespoke, and so you were kind of frozen out of it. Now, all of that changes, of course, with the arrival of mass manufacturing. So in the past, I would say, think of it like the companies building legal tech for you guys in the past were a bit like this. A hobbyist, an enthusiast in a workshop building something they cared about that was prohibitively expensive for you to buy. What it looks like now is like this. It's a modern assembly line. We've moved from sort of the bespoke, the Maybach era of 100 years ago to Henry Ford and the Model T. What that means is that you're going to have access to wonderful, easy to use solutions. It's going to increase access to justice. So these are tools everyone can use. Everything we build, yes, they are used by AmLaw 100 firms, 100%. They were some of our earliest clients, but they are just as usable, if not more so, by smaller law firms. It also means that as an industry, we're able to dictate where AI goes. So this is something we were really excited about. This is earlier this year. We were invited to be a founding partner of the Vector Institute that was created by a few $100 million worth of government funding, matched by the private sector. So Google, Uber, NVIDIA, a few others. We're the only legal technology company invited to be part of it. And through that, we're able to really dictate where artificial intelligence research goes. So I want to leave with sort of this. There's a lot of sensationalization of what's happening in AI. AI is not, it's not going to create a robot lawyer. It's not here to replace us as humans. It's not here to replace us as lawyers, but it is going to augment what we can do. What I like to do is I like to close on this quote. So this is a photo of a young, slightly less grumpy Steve Jobs. This sort of, his late 20s, maybe early 30s. So he'd already introduced personal computing. It was transformative. Apple was wildly successful. But personal computing wasn't yet a mainstream technology. It was used by design agencies, accounting firms, hadn't quite broken through to the mainstream. And he was asked by an editor for Time magazine. Basically, in one sentence, they said, "Steve, it's great. You're rich. You're successful. You win all these awards. But why should the average person care about personal computing. It seems like an expensive toy. And what he said, and it's sort of perfect for describing what AI does now. What he said was, personal computing is like a bicycle for your mind. And I think that applies wonderfully to artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is like a bicycle for the mind of a knowledge worker. So let's unpack that for a second. What does that mean? A bicycle is a machine created, designed, and even invented by human ingenuity, created by human hands, powered by a human. We have to pedal it. A bicycle will not move without you pedaling it. It's guided by a human as well. But a human with the bicycle can go farther and faster than ever before possible and explore entire new horizons. That's what's going to happen with artificial intelligence in the entire legal profession, and something we're already doing when it comes to legal research. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Thomas. If you want to go to the next slide, or maybe I can do that. Let's see.
Sure. Yeah. Let me just.
Oh, there we go. I got it. So if you have questions on today's program, again, you can submit it through the question box in the control panel that's on the right-hand side of your screen. While we're waiting to see if we have any questions, I have a few that I want to throw out there. First of all, great presentation, Thomas. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the legal research software and how does it work in terms of what's different about it than just a simple keyword search, for example? How does that work differently?
Yeah, sure thing. You know what? We're not going to be able to do a screen share where I show my screen and just use the technology, will we?
Probably not the way we have the system set up right now, but if you could just talk us through at a high level what's different about it.
Yeah, so what we've created is a system where you can jump in, you can type your question in as is. So I don't know, let's say, can I declare a Chapter 7 bankruptcy if my common law spouse has declared personal bankruptcy in the last 3 years in Indiana? You type that question in, you can add in additional filters. So what we started with is the ability to add in different motions you care about. So let's say motion to stay litigation, and then facts. So maybe, I don't know, bankruptcy of an agricultural company across state lines. And you're able to get an answer to your question right off the bat, to your question of personal bankruptcy, but the system is going to frame the responses by really prioritizing cases that match not only answering your question, but the exact motion you're looking for and the exact facts. The next sort of few things we're rolling out are also the outcome as well as the judge. So what that allows you to do is we're moving from the day of hunting and pecking for hours to find a case that kind of half answers your question to finding the perfect case for your question of law. And whether that's because you're going to court or whether that's because you want to proactively advise your client, and inside of a couple of minutes, you can just type in your question, add in additional parameters, and get the perfect on-point answer. And what makes that possible is because we started from day one as an AI search company, unlike the larger companies out there that we all use. As attorneys, we were able to build a foundation of natural language search. And on the back end, we were able to create our own technology that can retag and resort all American case law, so sort of give or take 20 million cases, based on exactly how we define relevancy and what we care about as users.
So that was that part of the training process then, what you just talked about with going through the old case law and retagging it, or is that something different than training?
Yeah, so that's kind of the beauty of it, is that because of a lot of the training we did early on, we do not need to have humans go through all case law and tag it. We don't do any tagging with case law. So once you have an AI system that's been trained through hundreds of thousands of examples and a lot of user interaction as well in the past to understand how cases are laid out, where in a case it'll say where a motion occurs, where in a case it'll lay out the facts, you're able to, without explicitly training it, have a system that can basically break down and order in a nav bar for a user to see exactly where a case is talking about parts of the facts they should care about, exactly where the case is talking about the different motions they care about, and exactly where in that case their question of law was answered as well.
Okay. So if somebody were to use a system like yours today for legal research, they can just out of the box use it, right? They don't have to do any training for their particular field of law or the types of, nature and type of motions or things that they might be looking for. You just start using it, correct, as a user?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so it works across every single area of law. It's practice area agnostic. Moving forward, we'll actually start being able to move it into even other countries' judicial systems as well, starting with obviously, English-speaking common law systems, but down the line we'll go into other languages as well, and civil law systems. And that really speaks to, once again, sort of the power of building that strong natural language processing foundation early on, which then through the process of machine learning, when you're able to bring on a really world-class talent, it's really sort of a compound growth curve. So early on, you focus on something that seems simplistic, right? Just getting great answers to case law questions. But from there, it's able to start learning faster and faster. So the goal on our end was always a tool. You don't have to train it at all. You just get access, within about 2 minutes, you know how to use the system. It's very, very easy. And from there, you're able to start getting great answers to your questions. You get the same answers someone at a big law firm gets. You get the same answers that someone at, an attorney general's office that uses Ross gets. And that's really the modern era of AI. So in the past, there were some early AI companies in legal that did cool things, but you had to train their systems. And what that meant is that it basically, unless you worked at a big law firm, you had a few $1 million of budget, you couldn't really do anything with the technology. What we've built is really, it democratizes the process of legal research. Anyone within a few minutes can jump on and start really diving deep into legal research very efficiently and very accurately.
Okay. You were talking about big law firms and various people that might have used systems like this earlier. Let's talk, or in the early days. Let's talk a little bit about who would be the user of a system like this today. Is it still the traditional researching role in that oftentimes that's law clerks or newer associates in law firms, or does this actually move the technology into more of a support staff role where somebody who's not a lawyer or in legal training can use this type of technology?
So that's something we would get asked a lot early on. This is still a tool designed for someone with a JD to use. And it always will be, right? So our goal is to enhance the abilities of someone who already is doing legal research. It's not to allow, just anyone to show up and do legal research. Legal research is an incredibly important and complex task. And so this really is designed for folks that know how to do it already. That being said, it allows you to get more accurate, on-point answers so much faster, and also find cases that you simply wouldn't have found using other systems. So generally, what we hear from our users is it saves them between 50 and 75% of their total research time. So it's huge time savings. But I think more importantly, it unearths cases that they'd spent 10 or 20 hours on a Westlaw or a Lexis or a Bloomberg, Fastcase, CaseMaker, whatever. They're all great systems, but they'd spend hours and hours. They hadn't find anything on point. They jump on Ross, and then right away they find something. What that means is that yes, for people, the law clerk, the junior associate, the law librarian as well, that are doing research, yes, this is a tool that they want to use right away. For obvious reasons. But what it also means is that it so fundamentally changes legal research as a task, because it transforms it from this tedious, frustrating thing to something that really can quickly and easily accelerate your understanding of an area of law. This is a tool that partners use as well. And to be honest, some of our best users actually are partners that typically, they hate research. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But if they had a system that easily gets them answers, they will jump in. If they have a client call them out of the blue with a crazy question at 5 p.m. on a Friday, they now have a technology that can actually get them answers fast, so they can use it sort of reactively, but also proactively to just sort of play around and understand how the law is changing. In fact, that's one of the things we built in from very early on, is the ability to track entire questions of law to see how they evolve. So to receive pings, to receive notifications if case laws are released that addresses an entire sort of holistic question of law. So you're always aware of how case law is changing.
So, I mean, those are some interesting numbers. The reducing the time by 50 to 75%. Obviously, there's a huge efficiency gain. Also, sounds like the overall quality of the results is a big deal too. I assume that is the secret behind that really lies in the algorithms that you use. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's one of those things where. Sorry, go ahead.
Without revealing any company secrets, I mean, what can you tell us about the algorithms, or just kind of how this is approached?
Yeah. So yeah, without getting whacked on the wrist by our communications team for giving away the secret sauce, I guess think of it like this. So the systems I was trained on, when I was in law school, when I was a practitioner, when I was at Dentons, basically what they were doing is they were attaching a whole lot of bells and whistles to technology that was created in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Boolean search. And we all know Boolean search is like, right? If you're doing legal research. And what people forget is that early days when you use the internet, that's how you search for stuff. Before Google was great, you had to basically write command lines to search for web pages. And the solution for that, before Google showed up, was Yahoo. And what did Yahoo do? Yahoo didn't have great technology. But they had a great team of very smart people, right? And basically their mission was to sort of create a taxonomy for the entire internet and to categorize it. So they had Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Sports, and early on that worked because the internet was still growing. There was not that many web pages. But over time, it became impossible because the internet was growing at a compound speed, right? Especially as entire countries came online. So no organization, no body, no huge number, no army of humans would be sufficient to categorize the entire internet. And when we look back at Yahoo now, we almost laugh. The idea, explain to an 18-year-old, explain to one of our new programmers, who comes fresh out of high school, what Yahoo tried to do, and it sounds crazy. People say there's no way on earth you could categorize the entire internet, but it made a lot of sense, right? Early on, what Google understood and what they invested in, and it took them time, right? Google was not better than Yahoo early on, was the internet's going to become too big. It's going to be impossible for even an infinite number of humans to categorize this properly because it's going to become so subjective. We just need to make search perfect. That's what we're doing with our legal research technology. So we don't rely on huge numbers of lawyers. We hire a lot of lawyers, but that's because they basically work as engineers alongside a machine learning team to make search perfect and to keep refining just how context specific your search questions can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that's interesting. You just had a comment about you hire a lot of lawyers, and one of the things that we see in our business is people who had been working as docketing professionals. Now we're moving them into roles where they're supervising and developing and assisting with the creation of our automated tools. Is that what is happening in your company too with the lawyers?
So I'm biased, right? I was a lawyer before, and I moved into technology. And to be honest, I did not come from a technology background. I think what I see happening when we hire lawyers, and when I speak to lawyers that reach out that want to learn how to move into legal technology, what I say is this: listen, as lawyers, we're subject matter experts. We have an incredibly deep knowledge of a very specific part of society, which is law, and we forget how specific that knowledge is. Right? The average American does not really understand the legal system, and that not just the average American, the average Italian, the average Swahili. Knowledge of law is very specific, and legal technology companies, because there's such a rich data set for training AI systems around case law and around statutes. Legal technology companies are for the first time ever able to attract incredible engineering talent. The thing is, incredible engineers are great at being engineers. They don't know, the first thing about law. And so they need lawyers alongside them. That's the sort of the type and the profile of lawyers we aim to hire. We want people that are a bit more entrepreneurial, that want to be part of building incredible technology. That we need the background. We also need even their experience having worked as a lawyer and worked with lawyers, but it almost becomes a fun hybrid role. I think in terms of what legal technology overall does to the profession, I don't think it's going to reduce the number of lawyers. I think it's going to definitely change the type of work we do as lawyers. And it's almost a return to the beginning where I think law will become more, being a lawyer is going to look more like what it was like 150 years ago. There's probably going to be less massive firms, but there will certainly be a few. It's going to be more, you interface with your clients, you know them well. You don't need massive overhead because you have AI technology that can help you. And it's going to be more based on, I think, personal relationships and proactively understanding what your clients need.
Well, that's interesting. Going on that theme of what's the practice of law going to look like in the future, what do you see as a future trend or trends in the area of legal research?
That's a great question. I think that, look, for a long time, legal research has been, basically, it's been slowly offshored and outsourced. And that was happening before 2008 with the arrival of the LPOs, right? The legal process outsourcing companies, many of which were based in India for a lot of really compelling reasons, right? You have extremely high degree of English proficiency. It's a common law system, and wages are lower than the United States. It was already happening before 2008. 2008 really exacerbated it, right? Because clients became way more price sensitive in terms of legal spend. So any way a firm could keep their clients happy by reducing legal bills on tasks the clients felt were repetitive, i.e. doc review, due diligence, legal research, law firms had to do. I think that AI technology kind of just, it puts that trend into hyperspeed in terms of clients no longer want to pay for legal research at all. They view it as, I don't want to pay you to learn how to do your job. It's sort of that kind of talk track. So where you have legal tech that lets you still do that legal research and ideally do it in-house instead of outsourcing it, but do it much faster, it allows you, to be more profitable as a law firm because it's very hard to bill your clients for this time. So if you can do it faster, that's great. It also allows you to make your clients a lot happier. So instead of legal research being something that's annoying that comes in from a client and then you just have to, it's a fire drill. You drop everything, get an answer to this thing, draft a memo. You can now answer those fire drill questions fast. But you can also just start proactively researching in a way that didn't exist. So I think legal research still, it's not going anywhere. It's just becoming less of a knee-jerk reaction, and it's becoming more of something, if you invest a little bit of time, you can provide fantastic client service.
Well, Thomas, I really appreciate your thoughts, and it's fun to think about where the field is going. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
I think the thing I would leave everyone with is legal technology is just starting to take off. There's a lot of companies doing really exciting things. I would really encourage all of you to follow us on Twitter. So my Twitter handle, my name is Thomas Hamilton. My Twitter handle is TJ Hammy. Our company Twitter account is Ross Intel. We publish stuff all the time. We have a great blog. We really try to bring together the best and the brightest of legal technology outside of our company. So law professors, senior partners, sole practitioners, anyone interested in legal technology, we try and feature on our website and on our Twitter handles. So follow us. This is really an exciting time for legal technology. There's a lot of things happening, and expect wonderful, easy to use technology that's just going to make your life a lot easier, and frankly, your practice is more profitable, but also more exciting as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And then I also want to remind the audience, if anybody's interested in Black Hills IP services, you can please contact Jim Brophy, and his contact information is on the slide as well. We will make these slides as well as an audio recording available. They'll be on the Black Hills IP website in a few days. So please check back and also check out the other programs that we've done in this series. And then watch our website for announcements coming soon on future webinars for next year. Again, Thomas, thank you so much for your time today. I've enjoyed discussing this with you, and I want to thank our audience for participating. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Bye all. Take care.